Hey guys, welcome back to STEMdentity. I'm your host, Dr. Anna Hodgshire. I'm excited you're here today because something that's taken me a while to embrace, but now I completely embrace wholeheartedly every single day in my STEM career is that science and engineering is a team sport. The projects that we do, the things that we work on are so sprawling and complex that there's almost no way that any one single person can see everything end to end. There is finding the good idea. Then there's finding the funding for the good idea. There is actually figuring out how to collect the data, collecting the data, analyzing the data, perhaps modeling the data, writing up the data, and communicating your findings or building the product or whatever it is that you're doing, right? And all of that requires a ton of skills. And most of us are good at a handful of those, but not all of them. And something that I feel like a lot of people in STEM are not as strong at are the communication pieces of the job, whether it's giving a talk or writing up your findings. Many of us are pretty skilled over time at writing a scientific journal article. That scientific journal article is great for people in our field who specialize in what we do, but it might not be that accessible for people who are interested in just, understanding what you did, but they don't have the same background and they don't understand the jargon. Dr. Theresa Barosh, so science communication, so glad that you're on the podcast today. Awesome heroes of our field, and I'm really excited about today's guest, who is a science communication dive into it all. But right now, you are currently a senior science writer and communication specialist at CSU's Colorado State University's Atmospheric Science Department and the Cooperative Institute for Research in the Atmosphere, or CERA as it's commonly called. But you have a background in science. You have a PhD in ecology, casually just got a PhD in ecology and became a science writer, which is really cool. How we met, at least to my memory, you've had a couple of positions at CSU in this communications writing field. And you worked at where I work now, the Energy Institute, and I had gotten a large grant at the time. And, there was some excitement around that. And you interviewed me and you were a great interviewer and you made me feel very comfortable, and I kind of realized I'm not very comfortable being interviewed because it never happened to me, but I had maybe 4 or 5 interviews throughout that process and you were one of the better interviewers, so it really helps me see how much that matters. Being able to make people comfortable when they're being interviewed is a skill. It's not just something that everyone can do. So that's definitely something I want to ask about later. But I think I really would love to start with you got a PhD in Russian knapweed biological control, which I looked up a photo of Russian knapweed, didn't know what it was. It's this kind of thistly, nasty looking stuff. So I'm assuming it's an invasive species, needs some biological control, and now you're a communications writer. So can we dig into, how did you get into science in these biology fields originally?
Well, I grew up in Estes Park, Colorado. That's a small mountain town. It's called the Gateway to Rocky Mountain National Park. And so I was always really interested in natural history and what was happening around me in the mountains and why some particular aspen grove might be declining or how the pine beetle come in and just sweep through all the trees or, what's going on around me. And so that's where I started with my interest in nature and ecology.
Great. Yeah. And for people who haven't been, Estes is gorgeous. And I definitely get that because I had sort of a similar thing where why did I go into air pollution? I grew up in this cool area in Utah that was in between 2 mountain ranges, and we get temperature inversions in the winter, and all the air pollutants being emitted get just trapped in that cold layer of air right next to the ground. And so the sky literally looks gray when the sun is shining, which is horrifying. So I think it's nice that it's a kind of universal experience that our childhood experiences sort of guide us along the path of our career. So you started to go to undergrad. I think you got a Bachelor of Arts, and then what were sort of the events and decisions to actually get a PhD after that?
Yeah, so I went from kind of the small pond world of Estes Park, small high school and everything, to another small pond, Willamette University in Oregon, in Salem, Oregon. Um, And in those small ponds, I was always like very comfortable in a school setting or did well in a school setting, right? I'm sure it would have been different in larger larger ponds or larger lakes or, more competitive spaces, but having those small spaces where teachers or professors were aware of individuals and supportive in that way, really worked for me. And at the same time, as I was through high school and undergrad, I took all kinds of jobs through the summers or through the semesters to support my education. And, I was a trout wrangler. I taught people how to fish. I worked at a museum. Um, I was an undergraduate teaching assistant, and then it really stuck. So none of those really stuck. I do something for a semester. Oh, I was a park ranger. Um, yeah, I do something for a summer or a semester, and it didn't hold my interest to bring me back again until I was a research assistant and got to work on kind of plant insect interactions and start into that research world. And that's when I was like, okay, I want to come back and keep working on this and keep doing this. And so then a few years of undergraduate research, I really wanted to keep doing research and I wanted a really big project. I remember this when I was interviewing for graduate schools. I wanted a big project. So I didn't want to do a master's degree, even though now I would recommend that someone start with a master's and then go into but I wanted the biggest project, right? Like I wanted to just spend years and years doing some kind of research project. So I interviewed at a bunch of places and that was kind of what was on my mind, what I was thinking about.
I'm not gonna lie, you're maybe the first person I've ever heard say, I want a really big project that takes years to complete. I think a lot of us, myself very much included, tend to be a little on the shorter scale. We're like, it's hard to conceptualize years of work on anything. Again, maybe this is just my bias. I tend to enjoy shorter things, or at least things that have milestones along the way or whatever you want to call it, that give me that sense of like, I did something, yay, accomplishment. I do want to backtrack for a minute though, because I think that some listeners maybe are in undergraduate or they're considering going back to school. How did you even get the opportunity to be a research assistant in undergrad? Because that's not universal necessarily.
Well, I think again, it helped being at that kind of smaller liberal arts style university setting where I was getting to know faculty across lots of different disciplines. I think I applied for a bunch of research experience for undergraduates. I happened to get this one. I'm trying to remember. I mean, I definitely knew the professor and kind of her lab, and she was working with plants and insects, so it was very much within my area of interest. And so it just worked out, right? Like, I think someone told me that, it's not that you're lucky, it's that you're willing or ready to take on opportunities when they present themselves. Like, oh, okay. That does kind of represent a lot of the places where I feel like I've been lucky.
Yeah, I really like that perspective on life where, I think there's probably more opportunities around us than we realize, but we have to be open to them and willing to take them on. For me, I'm very a homebody. I don't love to travel, so there's probably a whole world of opportunities where I could be out, spending months at a time, either in the field or working at another university. And I'm like, I don't care. I would hate that. That would make me absolutely miserable, but I have tons of really cool opportunities that I'm excited about all the time. So it's really, you know, it's okay to say no to the things that don't light you up, but do try to say yes to the things that you feel like, even if it doesn't make sense in the moment, I don't know why I would say yes to this thing, just go for it and see what happens. That's the advice I always try to give my students, at least. Cool. So you got your opportunity to do a big project with your PhD. Can I get like the 30 to 60 second, Russian napweed? What was the big outcomes of the project?
Oh
I'm
no,
super
I
curious.
can't talk about my own research. um, that's too hard. Okay, so I need to explain what biological control is. That's when you bring in a natural enemy, is what it's called, of an invasive species. So,
Okay.
as you said, Russian knapweed, non-native. It has been here for quite a while, but non-native, toxic to horses, kind of challenging in rangeland, especially. And these two biological control agents were approved for release on Russian knapweed. One was a gall midge, and one was a gall wasp. Okay, now I need to explain galls. This is not going to take 30 seconds because I'm
That's
like,
totally fine.
still years later, like any researcher, I want to give you way too much
I'm
information.
enthralled. Keep going.
Yeah, galls are the best. I worked on galls as an undergraduate student. That's the whole takeaway. The whole takeaway is galls are the best. That's all
Perfect.
anyone needs to remember.
All right.
Yes. So galls are like a little hotel room for an insect, bloated plant material where insects develop. And so this adaptive strategy has it's come about, evolved many different times in many different species. There might be even like 2 million species of gall forming insects out there. Um, okay. These two little insects attack this plant, make this funky bloated plant material. They attack different parts of the plant. So I was especially interested in questions like, are two biological control agents better than one? Is it better to management? Do we get more management of the plant by having two biocontrol agents? And then, based on some of my early results, I was interested in, is it all competition between these two insects when they're feeding on a plant or in a population? So, different scales of interest. Is there some facilitation or some interesting other interactions going on there?
Okay, that's great. Galls are the best. That's our number one, our
Yes.
first takeaway. I'm sure there's going to be other excellent takeaways, but so watching you tell that, I feel like I'm starting to get the hint of why you went into science communication because you lit up. You're like, yes, let's talk about this thing. But you could have stayed in research, right? You made a decision. I'm assuming, well, I shouldn't assume anything. It could have been a slow shift. It could have been a one day you just woke up. How did that kind of look along the way in school, whether it was your PhD or undergrad, that started to point you towards science communication as what you wanted to do when you graduated?
I always thought of science communication as like a responsibility or
Mm.
something that had to be part of being a scientist, right? And so that was always a big piece for me, and sometimes probably to the detriment of my graduate degree, like over focusing on community outreach and engagement. But that was a big piece of what I was doing. So near the end of my program, I took a science communication assistantship with the graduate degree program in ecology. Um, and that was the first time they had a communications position. So it was all just building stuff from scratch. And it was so fun. I felt like I suddenly really fit. And it was also fun because I had an amazing cohort of other people in my degree, and I got to just talk about my friends' work, and share what was going on throughout the program. So that was amazing. And that's, I guess, what started me.
Is that science communication assistantship? Is that something that's, to your knowledge, is that common at universities or is that kind of unique to Colorado State University?
In some ways, it's unique to the ecology program. In other ways, I, okay, it's kind of a joke amongst communications professional. We'll just hire a student with
Mm,
no training
oh boy.
to do that, right? Which I mean was similar, like basically, I didn't have any experience in the PR world other than just, being a scientist trying to share my work, right? Um, I think so. It's kind of this joke that people don't take communication seriously or think that you need training in it and you can just like throw anyone at it. But on the other hand, it is like amazing professional development, right? And I was able to find lots of different support to learn through that. Okay, your question was, is this unique? It's not totally unique. There's a lot of hiring students to support communications efforts.
Okay, cool. And you mentioned the support, but let's maybe dig into that a little bit more. What did support look like for you as you transitioned more to communications? Was your advisor supportive, friends, family? And then were there also people, entities in your life that kind of tried to pressure you to stay in a direction that was maybe more sciency, quote unquote?
Yeah. So through that assistantship, I think we always, all right, let me back up. We always provide, like, give advice for graduate students that they should find multiple different types of mentors, right? Not
Mm-hmm.
just depend on their faculty mentors or their committee members, but find a couple different types of mentors. They might be, identity-based mentors or different areas of expertise, or so I do feel like I was really fortunate in that. And through that assistantship, I got to work more with kind of the science writers at CSU and got to start learning about other opportunities or other potential career routes.
Yeah, I don't know that everyone has actually gotten to hear that advice. So I just want to repeat it, which is find different mentors that have different skill sets that can help you with different things. I don't feel like I really got that message very clearly during my PhD. I mean, it wasn't intentional. I think it just wasn't really communicated. I think that's more emphasized more now, but it's such great advice that, yeah, I just kind of want to highlight that one because it's really important. I think I didn't really know what I wanted to do when I was figuring out, life after grad school because my main mentor was an academic professor at a university. So I was like, well, I get, maybe, I don't know. This doesn't quite seem like what I want to do. And it wasn't really until actually the atmospheric science department held a couple of panels of different career types, and one of them was an industry panel. And I just saw myself at that time in the industry positions, not the other type of positions. So it was really helpful. And then at that point, I was able to very slowly start to build up some mentorship in the direction I wanted to go in. I think that's really key advice, which is don't just have one mentor, because then it's really easy for many people, myself very much included, to try to figure out how do I make my life look like my mentor's life, because that's all I know.
That's what they know, or well, faculty advisors know how to advise you to follow their career route. And, I think in academia, we tend to act like that's the best route to become, also a faculty member. Um, and so, and pursue like a tenure track position. But there's so many different things that you can do.
Yep. Which is why I have you on, because I think it's really cool that you and I have like this almost parallel track. We both went to small universities. We both got our PhD at CSU roughly the same time period. Like you literally, actually probably the same time period because you graduated 2020 and so did I, 2014. Anyways, and we both have very different after, I wandered off to industry, have wandered back into academia, wandered into a tenure track faculty position. Who knows where I'll wander next? You're in communication. That's maybe your forever home, maybe not. I think that's part of why I'm so excited about this podcast, because I'm like, guys, there's so many routes that you can take. It's really just what are you excited about, and what are the opportunities that you can take that help you understand, oh, I thought I was excited about that, but yes, I still am, or no, I am not. At one point, I thought I was excited to get an MBA. I started it and I hated it, and I was fine with that. I dropped the MBA.
And being like, wandering is amazing and so much fun,
Yeah,
and being flexible and aware, like, that you can change, not feeling stuck in some
yeah.
route, like actually listening to your brain and your body and paying attention to yourself and saying, oh, is this working for me or not?
I
Yeah.
absolutely agree. And I know that for some situations, it can feel more stuck because maybe your family is here or you really need that financial stability. So maybe that's where you're moving a little slower. You're not just abruptly quitting jobs like I have in my past. And I don't recommend everyone should abruptly quit their job if they're unhappy. I do recommend like you do what's right for you, but you can always make even lateral shifts within your current position to move towards what you're more excited about over time.
Absolutely.
Yeah. We touched on this a little bit, but were there any other big training opportunities that you can remember in school before you left school and jumped right into science communication as your career?
Um, yes, I had lots of mentors with lots of different styles. We had this one course. So in the program, people with an area of interest could, kind of teach a course. It could be basically a journal club, or it could be all kinds of different formats. And so a small group of people, this big name researcher, and I think maybe a grad student and a postdoc got together and wanted to teach about science communication, especially kind of the PR, public relations side of it, and like op-eds and stuff like that. And so they had a course, and this was pretty early in my graduate degree program. And you could see, I mean, it was the first time they taught it. And
Mm.
so they were kind of figuring it out as they went. But even just within that area, they had really different ideas. And I think that happened a few times, throughout CSU or throughout like mentors around communications. People would act like there's one way to do something, but then they'd have really different, like all these amazing experts would have different ways of doing it, which was really good for me to see. That course, I remember, I remember one of the faculty members was really disappointed. We had a group project and we um, submitted, our first draft of our article, and we got this like horribly grouchy message. And I just took it like, okay, this person probably has something else going on in their life. Like, this is not representative of our work. It's a first draft, whatever.
Yeah,
But it was still like, whoa, to see that this person is like this huge, amazing professional. And where is this coming from?
yeah.
But yeah, it happens to the best of us. And so that definitely scared me a little bit as far as communications went. Took me a while to get back in there, but it happens. I mean, it happens a lot. People have strong opinions about writing and strong opinions about, all these different areas and different areas of expertise, right? Whether it's the science or the education or PR or marketing. And if you're coming, whatever background you're coming from or whatever areas of expertise, you're going to have, like, different ways of thinking about things and presenting things. And so I think it's taken many years, but it is nice to know that there are lots of different ways to do something.
I still struggle with that sometimes where I try to remind myself, okay, the person's work that's in front of me that I'm evaluating, think about where they are in their career stage before you go crazy on like the heavy edits or the grouchy comments or whatever. And yeah, sometimes I don't do the best. I could be a little more graceful in my feedback, but like you say, sometimes it's external circumstances. Again, maybe the person was just having a bad day, but it is important to remember, sometimes you just get bad feedback when you're starting off with something, and it's probably more that that person giving you the feedback kind of forgot in the moment that you're a beginner and that of course you're not, spectacular at it yet, and they shouldn't have expected.
Projects are hard anyway.
Exactly.
Yeah.
But you've graduated, and then I think you went straight into communication writing. Is that right? How was that transition?
Into communications, so it was like a broad communications position.
Okay.
Um, I worked for the graduate school, which is amazing. Very cool unit at Colorado State University. Got to really dig into a lot of like mentoring best practices and research or background there, and why different practices are good. So I was working at the graduate school in this broad communications position, and communications positions can get a whole bunch of projects. They can be, like I mentioned, marketing, science communication, journalism. They can be a lot of different kind of categories. And I definitely needed or wanted a position that was very science communication focused,
Hmm.
and like education focused. So actually, she was she the dean or the associate dean when she one of my mentors at the graduate school encouraged me. She's like, okay, you need a position with more science communication. Like, we love having you here. We want to keep you, but also you need to find the right fit for you. So that was really great for me. And so I went through kind of trying to find the right place that had the same priorities of science communication I wanted to be doing on a day-to-day basis, if that makes sense.
That makes sense. And I probably should have asked this at the very beginning, but to you, I think science communication can mean different things to different people. So, how do you define it, and what are you looking for when you want positions in science communication?
Science communication is so broad. So for me, the science writing is more the kind of PR journalism kind of side of stuff. So sharing our science stories, sharing big science news, highlighting cool projects that students are working on, or products that the Cooperative Institute for Research in the Atmosphere is coming up with, right? That kind of side of it is where I live. And so it's like an educational component, but my work tends to focus on someone with a bit of a background. It's not like a K through 12 type of education level. It's more for general public, if that makes sense. But yeah, science communication could be for any audience and through so many different kinds of platforms and styles and ways to do it. Um, I'm trying to remember this publication that I had in a presentation last semester. So it's been many months since I looked at this, but it had this really cool. Oh, it was in like the medical fields and thinking about communication. And it was this like triangle. So we have like an upside down triangle, like a food pyramid, which is also outdated. But okay, so the bottom, the bottom, the base is just like public. I'm getting way too deep here, but that's how I roll.
No.
The bottom is like public trust
Mm-hmm.
in the system. So maybe that's like hospitals having a good reputation, um, or even just on a broad scale, people's relationship to science, right? Um, and so I took this medical framework and was trying to apply it to atmospheric science. So that's what's happening here. Okay, so it had kind of the general trust in your medical providers, right? And then one of the next levels was kind of just communicating out updates, right? Or communicating like new recommendations or new findings or new research. And so that's where I love to live, right? That's the
Yeah.
cool place for me. And then, oh, the tip was like a terrifying place. It was like like misinformation, dealing with misinformation, and like after the fact, coming back and trying to manage some piece of misinformation that's blown up. Uh, that stuff's so hard.
That sounds
So
hard, and I'm glad that there's people that deal with that, not me, and probably not you.
I'm dipping my toe, but
Okay. All right. I hope it's not too terrible so far.
it's really interesting. The research and the background behind it is super interesting.
Hmm.
Putting it into practice is scary.
That's fair. Yeah. And so speaking of research, I mean, you just answered my question essentially, which, what's the overlap between science communication writing and traditional research, quote unquote? Do you get to get out and do research? When you're writing up an article, are you trying to understand the background? Are you more relying on your interviewees to give you all the pieces you need? What does that look like for you?
So I'll often, if it's a new publication, I'll read it beforehand and start working on a draft and questions, right? Or if it's a grant proposal, I'll look through it. But often after I chat with someone, or even while I'm chatting with someone, they'll be like, "Oh, you should check this out." Or when I'm going back and listening to an interview, I'll realize, "Oh, I should dig into that more." Or, "Oh, this would all come together really cool if I could tie this and this." Or yeah, so I'm always trying to bring in more context and support. And then when I'm interviewing people, actually, I'll often be like, "Oh, do you know about so and so's research over here?" And it'll, I don't know, my brain, the weirdest ties, right? I recently, we have this cool air quality team doing flights. And I was interviewing one of the students, and I was like, "Oh, I just saw this cool defense in ecology about elephants, and they were using planes to look at like where elephants are." And it was totally different work, right? Different questions, but interesting, similar technical struggles or specific, little details then.
I think that connecting work is so important, though. It's really helpful. I mean, gosh, I just read a thing this morning on the Icarus satellite where people are putting tiny trackers on animals and then using satellite to track them. And it's like well, their goal is hundreds of thousands of animals. They're not there yet, but it's so cool. So yeah, I think learning from different fields is really important. Maybe I'm biased because I'm now in systems engineering where we're like, we accept everything, we love it all. So you're at the atmospheric science department now and CIRA, which I know that you keep moving up, you keep changing jobs. The latest and greatest for you is you started a social media account. I'll be sure to link it in the show notes. It's really cool. You guys always put up really fun visuals and stuff. How do you balance that demand for all this kind of multimedia content? Do you feel like it's a lot of pressure, or is it just kind of fun and you just chunk out your time in your days?
I think it helps to really enjoy learning, right? And so I like learning new formats or new ways of doing things, playing with video or a camera. Like I don't feel like an expert in these areas, but I'm adequate. Like I'm a
Yeah.
jack of many trades. Like, okay, I can throw up some video stuff, or I can bring in a nice picture, or edit a photo. And so that definitely helps with having different formats. Um, it also really helps that my interests or my priorities match, and like the voice that I want to use, focused on education and mentoring kind of stuff, is fits with the unit. So, or the units, atmospheric science and the Cooperative Institute for Research in the Atmosphere. So, we're really focusing on that science communication and sharing those cool quotes about research. Versus, I think it's really easy when you run like a university account to get bogged down in this event or um, stuff that's not always so science focused.
Yeah. Yeah, speaking of, do you get chance, like how much oversight, maybe is not the right word, but that's what I'll use, do you have on your content? Is there someone above you who's kind of approving things, or are you it? Do you get a kind of
No, those
a
typos are all mine. Yeah.
that's it's fine. I never notice any
So
typos,
many
anything
typos.
too.
I used to be a real perfectionist about content. Um, More when I had a lot more editorial support.
Fair.
But yeah, with the social media, the people reviewing and accepting are the people who it's about, right? Like I want to be really careful that if I'm putting someone's voice and likeness and research online, that they're aware and comfortable with it, right? And ready in case if someone reaches out or any of that stuff. And so, they like people review before I put their stuff out. And then for Source, which is CSU's kind of main news blog, we do have an editor for that, like a college level editor.
Okay.
So a lot of the writing, so about half of my writing gets a good review. If I'm reviewing my own content, I try to let it sit and then pretend to be, that it's fresh.
Yeah, you always gotta like give it a day and then come back, but I think that's kind of fun. You get a balance of reviewing so that hopefully you feel like you're constantly growing and improving, but also autonomy so you're not just like constantly having to wait for someone to say yes, put it out. I hopefully that's a good balance for you.
Yeah, definitely. It really is.
Yeah.
And people in this setting, I feel empowered to experiment, you
Mhm.
know, to try something out. And if it doesn't work, it's not that big deal.
Yeah, and then, I know anyone who's tried to write up their findings for a broader audience, whether it's, an educated audience, a K through 12 audience, whatever have you, it's really challenging. I'm not good at it at all. I haven't done it a lot, so I'm sure I would get better with practice. But do you have any, this is kind of a broad question, but do you have any tips for listeners on improving their own science communication skills, kind of regardless of what level they're aiming for, whether it's, elementary kids or a room full of fellow scientists who are not in their precise degree program?
So you remember primary take home is goals are the best.
Girls are the best. Yep. Good primary take home.
Second take home is to choose 1 to 3 take home messages to hammer multiple times, right? Like goals are the best, which was totally not my plan here, but now we're in it. But normally, beforehand, before you get into an interview, I recommend choosing a take home message that is relevant to the interview. And and focusing on that. So, if you've published something really exciting, what's that really exciting piece? Or, maybe a couple pieces. But often it's one piece and maybe a couple of things people need to know for background.
Mhm.
And really focusing on that finding and that exciting piece. Often we get stuck on caveats and the limitations and the little details of the research because that's what researchers are doing on a day-to-day basis, right? You're so in it that
Yeah.
that's where your brain is and what you're thinking about. But um, if you get caught in that stuff, it's really confusing for someone trying to do an interview because that seems like the important stuff. But you need to keep that broader perspective and that backup, focusing on your take-home message. Goals are the best, and just repeating yourself over, over and over. And yeah, limitations are important. Like caveats are totally important that we understand that this research doesn't apply to everything. That it's
Mhm.
not some but overdoing that can be really detrimental to getting your story out. So just saying it once is enough. And if the reporter or someone, people want to get it right.
Yeah.
So if they've missed it, you know, they'll come back or they'll be happy to do a to fix it or something.
Yeah, I think that's really good. The 1 to 3 take home messages and spending a little bit of time in advance. That was probably my major mis misstep when I was being interviewed a year ago or so for that grant, which was that I was just kind of like, I have no idea what's going to happen. So come at me. Sure, let's go. And, I was just like a little chaotic. So now I try to remember to be a little prepared in advance. Goals are the best. I wish that could be my take home for all my all my stories now. It's so simple and catchy and it's fun. I like it. So along with these lines, obviously you have to interview people for your articles. How do you prep for these interviews? And maybe kind of related to that, and I can always repeat this, how do you encourage interviewees that might seem like they're struggling, maybe they're kind of rambling or not sure what they want to say? And then when it comes to the editing floor, how do you trim up what they've said? Especially me, I'm a rambler. You got to trim me up, into good clips that are appropriate for the media you're writing to, or video or whatever you're working on.
Well, I love the ramble, especially because my content doesn't have to all turn into this beautiful podcast like what you've got going on. I can go down all these weird rabbit
But the
holes.
podcast is meant for the ramble. That's why I do a podcast.
Oh, good point. Good point. So I used to be really concerned with. I tend to be a rule follower.
Yeah, I get it.
Yeah. And so I used to be really concerned about CSU's rules. I used to be really concerned about, like, especially training students for what it would be like to be in an interview with an external journalist and what that process would look like and all this stuff and just keeping it very professional. But I have certain mentors who will know who they are, who have taught me more to be a little bit more of a rebel, and that's been wonderful. And so now I think that I'm actually a much better collaborator because I'm not such a stickler for rules. So I, it helps to know my community. I really like this type of communications position because I get to work with the same people over and over, or the same community. And so I know, oh, that person doesn't like photos, or oh, this person definitely wants to review, even if it's just a small social media piece about one of their students'
Yeah.
interests in storm chasing, or, you know, so it definitely helps to know people. And then I think the more experience you have, the easier it is to be flexible too. So if someone needs questions beforehand, that's super easy. If someone wants to do it virtually or in person or while walking or whatever, that's great. So,
Yeah, I think that, understanding people, that's where I'm at probably with the podcast, where I'm finally remembering to mention if you like the questions in advance, I'm happy to provide them. And some people just want to read them. Some people put in notes. I interviewed someone a couple months ago and they put in like paragraphs. And I was like, you want to read your paragraphs? Go for it. I mean, they did not read off the paragraph, but I think that really helped them think through because I'm not interviewing cold. I have questions that I'm following along with, because otherwise I would just sort of ramble off into the outer space and have no idea what to say. And there would be a lot of boring editing of, long pauses of me like, hmm. So I think I like that, reminder that you are working with people and we're all different and we all have preferences. I would prefer for my photo to never be taken again personally. I forget how to be a human when the camera is like trained at me. Like candid shots, no problem. I have to stand there, horrible.
totally fair. I think people should feel empowered to tell their, communications team what
Yeah.
they like.
Because of course then that can't that stock photo is what shows up everywhere and I'm just like, oh, why is that?
Not what I want. Yeah,
Which is
absolutely.
fine. Well, people can't tell because we're on video, and you can't tell because I'm slouching, but I've got my Ologies shirt on, which is my favorite
Oh, yeah.
podcast, and Allie Ward is my hero. So they say steal from your best, so steal from the best. So I'm gonna pull her questions, but I'll also add in my own personal ending interview questions of what do you find most challenging about your job, and what do you enjoy the most about your job?
Ooh, okay. Um, I think going back to kind of the jack of all trades stuff, being interested in learning lots of new techniques and strategies, it can be hard to focus on your priorities because if leadership knows you have these technical skills in web editing or whatever else, video editing, it's really tempting to put you into all kinds of different projects or throw you at this, you know, um, different areas. And so it definitely helps to have a supportive supervisor and yeah, kind of a priorities and plan. So just staying focused, I guess, is the challenge.
Yeah, mine too, daily. I get it.
Because I'm so happy to like help people out and to work on anything other things. But then if I get bogged down on projects that aren't fun science communication and science stories, then I'm just gonna be miserable every day, right? And so I need like a good chunk of my day to day to be the fun stuff.
Yeah.
And then what do I enjoy? Yeah, the fun stuff, talking science, learning. And I think there was one point I really considered just continuing to be a student, like going into another graduate program or learning, something totally different. But this is a perfect fit because I get paid better than a graduate student and I get to learn all the time.
And you could always take a class for free through CSU, which is also really nice. Yeah. No, I get
Yes.
that. I love the learning aspect, and I've spent a lot of time over this year really emphasizing to myself, like, hey, you got to do something fun every single day, and you got to be curious about something every single day, because otherwise, I have no creativity, I have no joy, I start to hate my job. It's really easy for my job and many people's jobs to kind of degrade into only meetings and emails at this sort of level that I'm at. Like I'm not doing research. I have an amazing team who goes out and does the hard work. I'm running around making the connections, communicating the work. getting the next round of funding, etc. So yeah, finding those moments that remind me this is why I do this job is really valuable. And then maybe a follow up to that, because we haven't talked about it, which brings me joy, but we'll talk about it for a minute and I'll feel slightly less joy, which is, the elephant in the room for many things right now is AI. And how do you use AI to do whatever? Do you feel like your work is shifting because of generative AI tools? Have you found any, uses for it that you love, cons, etc.? Just maybe a little bit of your insight onto science communication and AI right now from your lens.
Well, I think we shouldn't. Um, I know that a lot of communications professionals are using it for, I mean, people are using it just to write emails.
Yep. It's insane. I just want to say for the record, multiple times out loud, you should write your own emails because you need to learn how to do the emotional labor of interacting with people. You can't just
Yeah.
outsource everything because at some point you're not going to even be able to talk to someone in person because you have like zero control.
You need to spend that much time on an email, then maybe there's some anxiety that you need to like work with and address in a different capacity than AI,
Yeah.
or you're in, a not great work environment
Mm-hmm.
if it's that much pressure on an email.
Totally
Um,
agree.
yeah, and we could go into that, but okay, AI. Um, yeah, I know lots of people are using it for communications, especially. I'm paid to write. Like, I'm paid as a science writer.
Yeah.
Why would I? Oh, I had I went to a workshop for communicators, kind of showcasing how to make your own agents and guide it and have all these rules for it so it's not messing up. And they did this example, like summarize this article about a science topic or something, and the AI, it made up a quote. It just totally made it up.
Uh,
But in the editing, like, oh yeah, like the double checking would take way longer than it would for me to just write the thing.
yeah.
And yet I would still, just because I am who I am, I'd start to second guess myself. Be like, oh, maybe I read this wrong. Maybe AI, like, maybe AI's interpretation is better, even if it was obviously wrong. So it's just better for me not. I have to say I will use it occasionally for a web edit, for HTML, like for code editing. Yeah.
I had a mentor recently say, make a very good point that AI has been developed by computer scientists. So of course, it's good at coding. And that's when I use it, it's for some sort of coding applications. Further outside of that application realm you get with AI, the more off the rails it's probably going to go. And that's certainly been my experience. And, I'm sure that I'll keep finding little uses for it, but it's driving me literally insane that I open up a PDF of a scientific journal article that I'm reviewing. And at the top, there's a little pop up box that says, it looks like this is a long article. Would you like to summarize this? And I'm like, no, close that box. And then at the bottom, it constantly keeps being like, would you like some help? And now Google Docs has added in some like little symbol at the bottom that I'm trying to figure out how to turn off because it's driving me crazy of like AI. I'm just like, no, I want to
I
do
need to figure
stuff.
out how to turn that stuff off too. So I'll let you know when
Thank you.
I need to
I
actually
tried some
take the
steps
time because
today.
I get so grumpy.
I know.
Why is
So
this taking up space on my screen?
exactly, like stop distracting me with your stupid stuff that I don't want. So kind of my end of interview questions are always around identities, since this is the STEM Identity podcast, and I really think that it's a lifelong journey to figure out and find and change and grow and evolve our identities in STEM. But you've found a really cool path so far. Before I ask my final two questions, I always ask, I do want to kind of touch on, do you see yourself potentially going back to research someday? Or is this like really scratching all of the itches of research and you're good to go?
So last semester, a couple different groups asked me to share a little bit about our video content for social media. And so I had a lot of fun. I don't typically think of myself as very strong in the verbal communications realm. So I'm not actually very fond of being interviewed like this or
Thank you for doing
presenting.
it.
Thank you for giving me the opportunity to practice.
You're welcome.
Um, but I do love putting together a presentation. So super into that. And I did a whole bunch of, pulled in all the education research and background of why we do things the way that we do, um, why the visuals match up with the words in certain ways, and why sometimes the visuals are really broad concepts, or all this fun detail about science communication and education. um, and I got to pull in some of our numbers and trends, and what's going well and potentially why, and trying to get at that a little bit, and that was fun. I haven't made a graph in years, so that was nice. So I like, I got to dip my toe in a little bit. And so I've been chatting a little bit with some social scientists and thinking about things that I could be involved with, but we'll see.
Yeah. No, I think that's great. And I think, again, it's not just one path. Just because your title says communication writer, whatever your title might be, doesn't mean that you can only do, one thing. It didn't say communication Instagram expert, but now you're an Instagram expert. So boom.
Thank you.
All right, so we made it to the end. So my favorite two questions. First one, if we think back, you started off in Estes Park, which I'm wildly jealous about, but that's fine. We can talk offline about how great that was. I mean, I grew up in a great place too, but Estes is gorgeous. You've done a PhD, you're a communications writer now. What's your favorite shift or update in identity kind of throughout those years as you found your way in STEM?
So I'm in back up.
Yeah.
In grad school, I started therapy, and that was amazing and definitely helped me get through it. And then afterward, I found like another therapist and started working on stuff and kind of asking, especially like, do I want to be a parent in this world of climate change and social injustice? How do my sexuality and gender and profession, like all of these different pieces, how do they fit in with that future? Do I want that future? Um, and the biggest shift for me was really when I started feeling through all that therapy, feeling confident in knowing personally my identities and my values and my just like knowing myself and feeling confident in it in a way that I didn't feel like I had to prove myself or go around like expressing specific identities, or even in, for professionally, but also like in sexuality or gender, not feeling like I needed to tell the whole room all the time. Just feeling like confident in the way I move through the world. And so that has been really amazing. And I did become a parent about 6 months ago.
Yeah.
And being a confident parent is amazing and wonderful. And I think that has been, yeah, being if I weren't in that space of feeling so confident and comfortable with myself, I think it'd be so easy to spiral out into anxiety about just, I mean, anything you're doing as a parent, right? Like there's, oh, what am I teaching? Am I doing this? Oh, is this safe? Is this, so many decisions you're making every day. That just feeling solid is really great.
Yeah, that's beautiful. Yeah, it's amazing to me how many times, and inspiring and very, very hope inducing, that how many times during interviews therapy has come up. And we've had, open and honest conversations about it. I'll talk about therapy all day. It just popped into my mind since we had touched on the AI thing a little while back, that, AI for productivity. I'm like, y'all, therapy is the original productivity hack. Like, I would not be where I am without therapy. I started it in my postdoc because I was absolutely miserable, thought I hated to do science. Just turns out I didn't want to code for 8 hours a day. I had no idea because that's all I knew. That's all I knew to
Yeah,
do. So,
absolutely. I do
yeah,
not want to code for 8 hours a
yeah.
day either.
I think if you're listening and, you're like, I don't know, I've never been to therapy. Is it worth it? If you're a student, there's almost certainly some amount of free resources at your university available to you. If you're a professional, your insurance might cover some amount of resources. Like there are ways to pay for it. There are ways to find the right therapist. If you start with someone and you do not like them, do not stick with them. Find another person. You literally do not even have to tell that therapist to their face that you do not like them. You're just like, not for me, and you move on.
Or there's group sessions, or there's so many different styles and ways,
Yeah,
to do it.
absolutely. And then the other kind of the flip side of the coin to that question, which is a core piece of your identity that you're still really proud to have.
Okay, so I've always preferred terms with a lot of flexibility, like gender fluid or pansexual, bisexual, omnisexual, and maintaining that kind of flexibility is really nice. In science, we need definitions and rigid
Yeah.
terms, but they sometimes also hold us back and frame how we're thinking about things. So just being that flexible, having that flexible mindset in all aspects of work and life is really, really amazing. Yeah.
Yeah, I really like that. And I think that that reminds me of our earlier piece where you were like, you were talking to a student and they were showing something like, oh, the satellite or airplane tracking with elephants. And I'm like, satellite tracking for, animals. And just that kind of that ability to be fluid in our thinking and who we are. And, I'm not the same person depending on who I talk to. Like, I'm going to talk to you differently than I'm going to talk to some executive at a large company that I don't know as well and I'm not as comfortable with. But then I also really like your points around that confidence piece. This is not the same necessarily, but for people that don't know me, I have a lot of tattoos, like many, and they're in very visible spots, and I love them. And I'm actually like so comfortable with them. And I can tell, and sometimes, not always, but sometimes you can kind of tell when someone's looking at you a little askance and they're like, and I'm like, honestly, I don't give a shit. Like, this is who I am. If you have a problem with that, you don't need to work with me. I'm not going to starve. you know,
I'm gonna be
like,
fine.
then I feel like other people are just like, oh, this is cool. I appreciate that you are a human that shows up as you are. And then that makes them feel a little more comfortable to show up a little bit more how they are, And so I think fluidity and flexibility is something that isn't spoken about a lot in science, because you're right that it is usually this very defined, rigorous sport that we do, but there's also a current under all that definition that should be allowed to flow through and make cool connections and find the next breakthrough. Because if we only work in little boxes, we're just going to make a box that looks like the last box. Well, on that note, I know you're a new parent. I know maybe waking up time pretty soon for your baby. So I'll let you get back to everything. But I really appreciate having you on. It's been so fun. It's been really fun to get to know you over the years. I was really sad when I heard you left my institute, but you're just up the hill. So I'm sure we'll interact in projects in the future.
Absolutely. Thank you so much, and keep your eye out for galls.
That's right. Galls are the best. Okay, my main regret of this interview is that I did not dig into finding out more about galls and why they're the best. So after the interview wrapped up, I went ahead and I found Theresa's dissertation entitled Plant-Mediated Interactions Among Gall-Forming Insects. And with Theresa's permission, I'll link this in the show notes. But this has, honestly, I read a good chunk of the dissertation when I found it because it was so cleanly written, so well written. You could already see that Theresa was thinking in terms of how do I communicate clearly to people who are not ecology specialists. And it's got sentences, the bangers like a classical biological control agent. The gall midge is a parasite on Russian knapweed, forming galls on the plant, inside which the gall midge brood, feeds, and develop. All right, well, I read that very poorly, and that's because I was actually editing out in real time all of the appropriate, I want to say Latin names, although they don't look Latin, if I'm being honest. They look a little more Russian. But anyways, she provides the actual species names, which I'm not going to try to slaughter on mic. I'm just going to replace with simple things like gall midge and Russian knapweed. But essentially, it looks like, again, quoting almost directly, but cutting out the complicated proper names from her dissertation. My study system involves a gall-forming midge that was recently approved for release against Russian knapweed, one of the most serious invasive weeds in North America. Again, the species name, I'll try it one time, Japalae ivanicovi, probably not even close. Japalae ivanicovi is a gall-forming insect that attacks the apical meristems that would otherwise develop into flowers, resulting in a strong potential for herbivore interaction on the same host plant. So while I'm clearly not an ecologist and I have absolutely no idea how to say any of these words, I did understand more or less what was happening. It seems that these insects, they formed this, like she said in the interview, kind of like a little house, and then herbivore interaction, right? Grazers come along, get excited, and eat the invasive plant preferentially, ideally. So cool thesis, even better interview. We talked about a lot this week. I think for me, what I would say is my learn and move your feet. In other words, we heard a lot. What's one concrete action we could take, put into place right now, is the piece around having a concise message, whether it's 1 to 3 takeaways, or if you heard the episode on 3-word advice, Brian Johnson's advice of the refined elevator pitch. This is all kind of falling in that same vein. So as you start to get towards, hey, I'm getting my conclusions, I'm getting my results, I'm excited to talk about my work, I'm excited to write it up, I'm going to be presenting it at conferences, there's going to be people who ask me what I do, the holidays are coming up and I got to tell my aunts what I do over the Thanksgiving, table or whatever it is. Having that refined elevator pitch, concise message that's clear, easy to understand, fairly jargon-free, 1 to 3 key points, is a really, really nice way to start to get comfortable with saying, this is what I do. And you can practice it. You can write it out. You can practice speaking it. You can lightly memorize more or less the cadence, the rhythm, the type of things you want to say, so that when someone asks you out of the blue, you weren't expecting it, you're not just kind of floundering for a little bit, but you're actually able to clearly and strongly communicate what you do. All right. Well, thanks again so much for listening. As always, this podcast is not affiliated with my teaching and research roles at Colorado State University, but is a part of my strong belief that we all have amazing jobs that have the potential to change the planet that we live on. So we should be able to love those jobs, and we should be able to love what we do. And hopefully this podcast is just a small nudge in the right direction for you in your journey and figuring out how to absolutely love coming to work every single day of your life. If you make it to the end, I give a song of the week. I love music. I was just on vacation, and I was very excited. The morning of my vacation, a new song dropped. It's a remake or remix, I don't know, sure, of a song that's been out for several years. So the original song is Hot Blooded by New Constellations, which is an awesome song. It's super vibey, perfect summer song. I will link all these in the show notes. So Hot Blooded is the original. The one that came out the Friday I was leaving for vacation was a Rose City rework by New Constellations and Starfucker. And oh my goodness, it's totally different, but super fun. The bass line makes me want to dust off my old bass. I barely play bass anymore, but it'd be totally worth it to learn this bass line. And then as kind of a bonus, 3 for Hot Blooded also has a slow reverb version that is just so tasty. I covered that in my own music project, Excess Sass. So that's 3 songs for this week. Hot Blooded, the slow reverb version, and Hot Blooded, the Rose City rework, with guest Starfucker helping out with that one. They're all super fun. I'll link them all in the show notes. I did make a playlist of those 3 songs, and left to my own devices, I would have listened to just those 3 songs for the entire 6.5-hour road trip to get to our vacation destination. But I was informed that was unreasonable, so I did not, but I was allowed to play it at least once an hour. So that was great. Listened to that song a lot over vacation. It was my vacation jam. So I hope you love it. I'm so glad you're here. Can't wait to talk to you next week. If you want to reach out and be like, hey, Anna, I got some ideas, things that you can talk about. Here's a paper you should have on Journal Club. I would like to be a guest, or here's a great person who could be a guest. Dude, reach out. I'm on LinkedIn, Anna Lily Hodshire, link in the show notes. I'm on Instagram, STEMdenity, link in the show notes. Music, as always, by Excess Sass. And we'll hang out next week. Have a good one.